Okay. Hello. Okay, I'm not going to do it again. Hi, everybody. I'm Terika. I am a UX researcher or a user researcher. Titles don't matter in this field, so we're just going to go with it. I've been in the industry for about 10 years now, and as you can tell from my accent, I came from the other side of the pond. I did not vote for Donald Trump. We'll just get that out of the way. I have, however, been working in this field long enough to know a lot about a lot of random stuff, and one of them is formative research methods. So as a researcher, you typically start by doing things like usability testing, and it's pretty basic stuff. And then gradually you get to move into projects that are a little bit more at the beginning of the project lifecycle. So before I continue, I just want to get a little feel of who I'm talking to in the room. I know that there's 2 researchers here. Any other researchers? Is that us? Is it the 3 of us? 4 of us? Great, okay. Any designers? UX designers? Ish. This is a weird one because only Americans really talk about this. UI designers. No other Americans in the room, fine. Devs? Okay. BAs? What else? What other roles do we have? Scrum Master, great. Content. Product manager. Strategy. Bro.
CRM and data insights.
Ooh. You and me, we're going to have a chat. Anybody else? DevOps. Yep.
Did you say marketers?
Nope. Hi, marketers. Is that it? Good. We've actually got a really broad range. I don't normally give this talk for such a broad range of folks, but this is great. So I've actually set this talk up to talk a little bit about UX as a general thing, just to give us all a bit of grounding. I know we all kind of work in the fields, but it's always nice to have a little lay of the land first, and then I'll go into, for the formative research methods that we'll talk about for today. So I always like to start with what is UX? Do you guys all know this photo? It's a pretty famous one. How do people walk up these stairs? Do they use the stairs? No, they use this path. This is a pretty classic UX design problem. So this guy, Don Norman, you guys know Don Norman? He's kind of the father of UX. And what he actually worked for Apple. And although Apple says that they don't do user research, they lie. Because Don Norman came up with this user experience, and we're not just thinking about this tiny product that we're working on and how do people make it through this product. We're thinking about the entire experience of interaction that the user has with our company and our products and our logo and our brand. So you don't walk into a Tesco with the same expectations that you walk into a Waitrose with, right? And it's because you know about the brand and what your expectations have been set by all of the advertising and things like that. That's the concept behind this. So what Don Norman said is user experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. And the first requirement of an exemplary user experience is to meet the exact needs of the customer without fuss or bother. And this, without fuss or bother, is really hard to get right. And this, the exact needs of the customer, most of the time you need all of your stakeholders on board with this, which is really hard to get right. The next comes simplicity and elegance that produce products that are a joy to own and a joy to use. So we all have that thing that we point at, being like, this is what I wish this was like. So anytime researchers nod along with me now, when you ask somebody, how do you want that search to work? They say, make it work like Google. Why? It's simple. It's without bother and fuss. It's elegant. It's a joy to use. Why? Because it works. And you don't get in my way when you're doing it, right? So that's the idea behind it. Sometimes when I talk about UX, it's easier to talk about the opposite of this. So I like to do other examples. Oh no! Oh! I'm gonna use my ninja arm for this. Okay. What a watering can that waters itself. Peep toe rain boots, anybody? No? This is my favorite one. How do you go up? Is it this one or is it this one? I don't know. But these are the examples of these moments when you know that a user, I'm actually scared of pressing it more than once now. Oh, did it. Meeting the exact customer needs without fuss and bother. That's the idea here, right? Okay, how do we do that? So one of the first things that we need to understand is, what are these exact customer needs? And this is where we come into formative research methods. So this is where we go out and gather, who are these people? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? How are they doing it now? And how should they be doing it? How can we make it easier for them? Do you guys know about the design life cycle? Are you familiar with this one? How about this one? How about this one? There's lots of variations on them. The idea here being that there's a product, you have a sort of visioning phase, you go through a bit of discovery, sometimes we use the 4Ds if you like those, design and build, then you go into implementation. I don't actually have a particular preference on them, I just like it shown that this is what a product does over its lifetime. The really important thing for researchers, and actually for everybody in this room, is to understand what questions you need to ask at what point in the product life cycle. When we're talking about at the very beginning stages, who needs help? And how are we going to help them? And then you start getting into, what do we already know about this issue or this population? What mental models do you already know that person applies to whatever product you're using? You don't go through a grocery store like you go through a clothing store, right? That's just not how you navigate the world. And then we move into things like, can users successfully make it through this journey, and if not, why not? And then finally, did we help who needed helping in the way that they needed it, right? And it's this kind of, we're asking the right question at the right time. What happens normally in formative projects when they call it a formative project? They start here. They've already designed something. They've already decided what the thing is. They didn't bother to do this very critical element. So, Shazam. Great. So the first thing that you need to do, which I know is it's kind of a wanky phrase, but it is something that we all use, is understanding the problem space. So I have a fun little exercise. These are sort of real, as in a lot of it is based on actual briefs that I've gotten from clients. And what we're going to do is spend like 5 or 10 minutes going through the brief and asking the questions that you need to ask in order to figure out what they mean. This is the most important part. So much is like, this is your foundation of your building right now. So I'm going to give these to you. They are kind of hilarious. There's 2 of them. One is probably the best brief I've ever been given by a client. The other one is more typical of the kind of brief that I get. And the purpose here is to start thinking through, what questions do you have and do you need answered before you can actually really start thinking about this product or this project. So yeah, the idea here, I'll give you like 5 minutes to read it over, because the first one's actually quite long. But the idea here is, what questions do you need answered? What additional things, what have they left out? Do you have all the answers? And what do you want to do next? This is a formative project. What are the next questions that you want to answer? All right, you got that brief from somebody. Now what? I just assume you need a second one. Yeah. I no joke get those. Obviously, so the thing is that I ask follow-up questions in both of these scenarios, but the follow-up questions that I'm asking are very different. So what questions do you need answered at this point?
I want to know what things the customer would expect to achieve on the website.
Yep.
And the workflows required to achieve those goals.
Yep. What else? What other questions do you need answered before you can get started? Did you make those up, or did they actually, are they based in research somehow? Yeah. A really important question. What's the difference between new and existing users? Who's the target audience there for new users? Who are they? Yeah, that's a good one. What motivates people to switch accounts? You've actually touched on a number of them. So How I break it down when I'm asking upfront questions are basically these kind of 5 categories. The first one is about business objective. What is the goal of this project, and how are you measuring success? So I'm in a project right now, it's a formative project, where I've literally sat in front of 15 or so people and been like, what is the point? What are we doing here? What is the point of this project? And it sounds like a facetious question, but it's really important to get right, because if there is a business goal that is not being measured, how do you know if you're being successful or not? This is about, and we're thinking really big spectrum here, but if I'm thinking about how am I going to relate the user experience to whatever their business goal is. So totally typically, a business goal is something like reduce calls to the call center, make it cheaper for me to do business, or the flip side of this, make it easier for me to make more money. It's one of those 2 things at the end of the day. So which one is it, first of all, and how are we saying this is strategically how the business has decided to do that thing? You need to know the answer to this question. And it's mostly because UX is in this weird spot of being kind of a baby field. It's not really a baby field, but for a lot of people, I still have to explain to my mom every time I talk to her what UX is, right? So, which is probably more a comment on my mom. But anyway, but the point being that we have to sort of give enough sort of credence behind this, and one of those things that you need to do is making sure that whatever you're doing, like straight back to whatever this business goal is. The second one is about project objectives, and why is the focus on this particular aspect? Why new customers? Why is that a thing? Why are we not talking about literally any other way that you could do this? The next one is really about the domain and the industry, and which is what is already known and what do we need to go find out? So this tends to be things like what's happening in this field. So if it's banking, sorry to drop the B word, but what's happening after Brexit? What does that mean? What does that mean for banking? What does that mean? Are we about to hit another economic crash? What does that mean? So we need to know what's happening in the rest of the world. This actually also means finding out about the brand itself. So the brand is, how is it perceived? Are we talking about Tesco? Are we talking about Waitrose? What's the brand? Target audience. Who is this actually for? So you guys actually hit on this, which is a really important one. And who is this? Do you know that for sure, or are you making it up as you go along? You're probably making it up. And the previous research, now this is a really important point. Have you done any? And if you have done it, you need to go read it. And I don't mean just reading the report, I mean reading how did they go about finding those things, because if you find that it's this beautiful 80-slide deck that was based on a focus group, alarm bells should be going off about that. My top tip, when you're in this conversation with your stakeholders, is to ask, why do you think that? Poke holes in the logic, because if you come across this, why is the focus on this? Why do you think that? Now you can say this in a much more pleasing way. I get away with it because I have an American accent where I can be like, why do you think that? But it is a really important question to understand the logic behind what they're saying. Okay, this talk is about formative research methods. Why are we talking about this? If you get this wrong, just throw all of your other research out the door. It's just become a moot point. You have to get this right, which is why I upfront with this kind of, you're just in taking a project, you need to know the answers to these questions before you get started. Right. Okay, so now we're actually going to talk about formative research methods. Okay, so just to give you some grounding about the difference between formative and summative. So in the sort of UX and research industry, we talk about these sort of 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. It's actually more of a linear process, but formative is on one end of the spectrum, summative is on the other end of the spectrum. Formative tends to be open-ended discovery of an opportunity space or a problem space. The emphasis is about learning. So this is all about tasks, roles, skills, who's got what, who are we trying to solve for? And the last one is the typical uses include requirements gathering, insight gathering for personas, if you do personas, concept design, etc. That's the sort of purpose of this end of the spectrum. The other side, slide please, is summative, and that's about validating things. So you've done a bunch of work, and now you've sort of figured out the direction that you're headed in. Now you need to do some summative to make sure, basically check and see if you're heading in the right direction. This is about course correction at this point. So you're validating aspects of the design through task-based testing. The emphasis on ensuring users can complete tasks aligned to the key objectives, and typical uses are, existent product testing, low and high-fi prototype testing, those sorts of things. And then these are the kinds of things that you do. You can actually click through the next 30. Yeah, cool. These are the kinds of things that you do at each of these 4 stages of the product lifecycle. So what we're going to focus on is really within these 2. So we've got subject matter experts, stakeholders, workshops, analytics, diary studies, usability testing, analytics, beta research, things like that. Before I go through, I've got 5 picked out, but just in case, does anybody want me to focus on one of these? I can talk about all of them. Or do you just want me to do my 5? I love it when I say that. Great. By the way, this is a mix of quantitative and qualitative. I personally am a big believer in marrying numbers and anecdotes together. They just create a more holistic view of that service. Right, carry on. We'll skip this because I'm gonna run out of time, I think. Yeah, we'll skip the exercise, we can go back to it. Okay, so the first one that I want to talk about is stakeholder workshops. Has anybody done a stakeholder workshop before? How'd it go? Yeah? Okay. The thing that I want to make sure that we cover in this room is a little bit about how to do and what to do in a stakeholder workshop. Stakeholder workshops are like blanket statement. You get a bunch of people in the room who requested the project and some subject matter experts and things like that, and you force them to get specific about what they want. Again, this is okay, why are we here? What are we doing here? Click it in. This is about the ultimate goal and how are you measuring success, yeah? So my top tip on this one is the solution will not be found here. Your stakeholders might think that they've just designed the whole thing and they're not sure why you're here anymore. But what you actually did there was figure out what the objective is and where their heads are already at. So you know who in the room is going to be your detractor, who you need to take along on that journey with you. This is also a really key point of this, because we all know that designing in digital spaces tends to be a bit political. So we need to take everybody on board with us. You're going to have your cheerleader. You're going to have the person who actually doesn't care but holds the purse strings. You need to figure out who these people are. In the background, you can do something like stakeholder mapping, which is things like who's interested, who holds the purse strings, who's not so interested, who can totally just flunk your project by being negative, essentially. Giggles like you've met that person. So the first thing that I actually do when I'm actually trying to figure out what we're doing here, once I actually get into this, is about the, sorry, you can actually go to the next slide, is the call center analysis. Your call center staff know oodles about the people who actually use their products to begin with. And this is not just how do they use it now, this is about who they are as people. So go and sit with those call center staff and listen to their conversations. This is really about why is the focus on this particular aspect or step. There's probably something in those call center, because classically, the whole purpose of the project is to decrease calls to the call center. If you go listen to them, you will start to hear how you do that. You may find out by doing this that whatever direction that your stakeholders have given you is totally wrong. And you need to then take them on this journey of, guys, I know that in our workshop we were really talking about this like amazing new feature that we're going to release, but it turns out that that's not going to work. Here's what is going to work. And it's this other feature over here. I need to tell you why I think that it's going to work. Top tip on this one is just go talk to the call center staff. They're amazing resources. So the next thing is an on-site survey. So this is one of those things that I always recommend to every company that I'm working with or every client that I'm working with. The thing about an on-site survey is you are actually finding out who it is that is coming onto your website, what they are trying to do and whether or not they think that they were successful. If you marry this together with the analytics, and if you can get it that granular, then now you've got this incredible amount of quantitative data to tell you about who they are and what they're doing already. Now, I can't tell you how many clients I've gone to who do not know who's coming to their website or what they're trying to do in the first place. It is an absolutely ubiquitous problem. So that's why this is, who is this actually for? Please do, sorry, yeah.
What's your response rates for something like that? How long do you run it for?
Great question. So I typically do these as a what's called a pop under. So you go onto the website, you do something. Usually you can do things like you can either wait a certain amount of time, like 10 seconds, or you can do something like they've gone through 3 pages on your website, and then you get a little pop under that says, hey, I see you're in the middle of something right now. Do you mind doing a survey at the end of whatever your journey is? When they exit that page, then you get the next pop-up that says, who are you? What were you trying to do? Were you successful? Please, please, please learn how to write a survey properly. There is an art and a science to it. If you click that button one more time, this is the book that I tell everybody to read. It's a really easy read, but it gives you all of the why do you write a question in the way that you wrote that question. Weird things like you always put demographics questions at the end of a survey. Why? Because if you prime someone to think about the fact that they're female, and then you ask them, are you good at math? They will say no. But if you ask anybody, are you good at math? They'll say yes. And then you ask them, are you male or female? It's a really weird psychological trick, but it is one of those things. Great. So contextual interviews. This is probably the one that you've either heard of or you've done if you've done formative research. This is the one where you go and sit with the people who are actually doing the thing that you think that you want to target. So this is things like, in this scenario, this guy worked for a company that I used to work for, and he is literally data entering. The thing being, it was an internal employee, we wanted to make their lives a little bit easier by building them some kind of tool. So what I did was I went out, literally sat in this man's living room, because he was a work from home dude, and watched him with his stacks of catalogs all around him and his data sheets, and just watched him interact with things. There's a whole art to making this not creepy, and you have to be really gentle about it. So asking like very nice, soft questions. Rule number 2, always with researchers, is always go in a pair, just as an aside. So this is, again, about what's already known about this audience, interaction flow, and how did you know that this is a problem? Again, the answer to that question is they don't know, they're probably just guessing. So what you need to do is go and find out. And this is one of those methods that it uncovers amazing amounts of information. So much information that you get overwhelmed when you get back to your desk and think, what am I gonna do with all of this? Top tip here, you have a lazy designer if they say, great, what he said was he wants to take this spreadsheet and put it on his computer. That's a lazy designer. What you're looking for is workarounds. Why is this paper and that paper saying the same thing? Why is he entering this thing 3 times? It's the things that they don't notice that they are doing wrong or that they are doing more than once. They've just gotten so used to the system being the way that it is. Those are the things that revolutionize people's lives. Cool. Sorry, questions on contextual interviews? Cool. Last one, comparator analysis. Has anybody done this one? No, okay. So this is one of those ones that is actually really, really critical, but again, it's how you use this information. So a competitor is a relatively obvious one. So this is this is Halifax versus Barclays. This is Waitrose and Tesco. They're competitors, right? A comparator is slightly different. Comparator is something like, I'm gonna take my search box on Amazon and I'm gonna compare it to Google's search box. There's something similar about them, but they actually don't serve the same purpose in the open market. It is really important to understand what the comparators are as well, because those are the things that people base mental models on. So if you've got your Google, that's what everybody thinks search is going to be like. If your shopping experience is Amazon, that's what your shopping experience should be like. But that's the mental model that people bring to the table. That does not mean that you do it like everybody else does it. What that means is you now know what the mental model is, so you can build off the back of that. Yeah. So this is what's already known. What do we need to go find out? And my top tip on this one, don't just play catch up, identify gaps in the market. If nobody's doing a good shopping experience, then don't make a bad one, because that's what everybody else is doing. Cool. So that's the kind of quick overview of those 5 ones. Does anybody have any questions on those guys? I realize I rattled through those really fast. Yeah.
Competitors, what if you're doing enterprise and
Yeah.
You haven't got access?
Oh man, okay. There's always a way. There's always a way in. So I was working for an insurance company. They have basically a purpose-built internal tool that is proprietary for them. I knew that other insurance companies have proprietary tools. Now, I was able to see 2 of the other ones by being a third-party researcher, because I'm not there as a competitor. I'm there to learn about other systems. But again, this is another thing about comparators, right? This is not the only internal system in the world. It might be doing this one very specific thing, but it's an internal system. So what do I know about internal systems? And actually, Nielsen Norman just did, this is sort of off topic, but Nielsen Norman always has sort of comparators and competitors analysis like this. So the thing is, outside of being a third-party researcher, where you can be like, I'm just here being a researcher. The other thing that you can do is just to be open about it. Just saying like, look, I'm trying to build a better system and I need to know what's wrong with your systems. The thing about employees is that they're happy to talk about, some might say bitch, about the tools that they use. So, and it is one of those things that even if you didn't have access to that, again, going back to the contextual research, understanding how somebody moves through a system and all the things that are being asked of them can be really insightful. Plus, you know, if you get really lucky, then you've got like a brother-in-law who happens to work for the other insurance company who's like, yeah, come on in. I've got 15 people for you to talk to. Other stuff? Is it super hot in here and we just need to go get a beer now?
What is publicly available? Because there's obviously a lot of research being done, but is it all in-house, or can you go?
You can.
You know where to look?
You can if you know where to look. I would always start at Nielsen Norman because they publish just shed loads of research. And they just have amazing resources for, especially for researchers, but for everybody, about who does what and who does what well. The other things I would just do are, there's an amazing amount that you can just do by Googling stuff and figuring out a way in. Yeah. I love a good Google, a look back machine to see what it used to look like. I mean, there's always ways in. But again, I sort of sit in a privileged position because I'm a researcher and I get to say things like that I'm like, show me.
Data, you know,
yeah.
But I'm not sure, I've not seen research or found the next useful way to go find that.
Yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of things that they're there if you know where to look. Yeah. But definitely start with Nielsen Norman and just do a bunch of Google searching. And it's usually, like if I'm searching for things like that, I'll usually search for something like, if it's a logged in screen of a banking website, I will literally search for like Banky McBankface logged in screenshot. Right. It may not be the most current one, but at least you have a vision of what it looks like.
Earlier on you mentioned focus groups and you insinuated that they might not be the right type of questions or way to find out the answers to questions. But would focus groups fit in anywhere here?
So the thing about, there's 2 things about focus groups. They serve a very specific purpose and they answer very specific questions. It tends not to be a question that UX researchers look at. So it tends not to be let me put this in front of you and get some feedback off the back of it, it tends to be more things like, who are you as a group? So it could be something that we might do sort of early on in the piece to try and figure out who these people are. It's not a method that I particularly enjoy doing or that I necessarily recommend doing, only because I find that I have other methods at my disposal, like surveys and individual interviews and contextual inquiry and things like that, that help me get to that answer that's a little bit deeper. Remembering that UX research is very rarely about what people say that they want and what people actually do and how we can layer that on top. So I often describe this like, I could not do my job if I couldn't see what you're doing. I can do my job if I can't hear what you're saying.
KPIs and metrics.
Yeah. This is mostly about how are we measure, what is success and what does that look like? So this tends to be things like, so I often use the three things that everybody measures as being like your KPI for UX, which is satisfaction, efficiency, effectiveness. And that tends to be things like, how fast did they make it through that? Did they actually do what they were supposed to do, and how did they feel about that experience? KPIs and metrics can also be things like reducing calls to the call center. But the thing about that is, if that's the long-term goal, I need a more proximal goal to understand what can I do that's going to affect that number. NPS is a terrible metric. It's terrible. The only reason why it's good is because lots of people use it, but it actually does not have any relationship to things like, you know, your business revenue and calls to the call center and things like that.
Yeah, just reduce calls to the call centre by making their number its directory.
Yeah, exactly. And this is such a crucial thing about how are you going about that? Are people having a really good experience and then people aren't calling? That's a great news story. If people just can't find your phone number and you're hemorrhaging clients, you're hemorrhaging customers, that's a bad news story. Yeah?
The co-creation.
Ooh, co-creation.
Customers as well.
It can do, yeah. And actually the best co-creation workshops I've run have been with internal subject matter experts, customers, and a few people who are in this room right now. Your content designer and your devs and people like that who just need to hear from the other people in the room. It absolutely brings it to life when you get to meet that person. Now you have a person in your head who I'm designing for now. I tend to not make personas. I tend to make designers go and listen to a usability session so they have a person in their mind that they're, I'm gonna get out of the way, that you're designing for. I really like co-creation workshops. Again, the point is, you're not designing the thing. That's not the point of it. It's getting out of that person what their mental model is as they're going through an experience. Yeah.
Mention mixing quant and qual.
Yeah.
Makes sense, totally agree. Do you ever start with one in order to find what that's telling you in order to guide what you're going to find with the other one?
Do you know what's funny? I'm actually not I'm not sort of firmly married to either way. I personally tend to start with qualitative and then move to quantitative and then back to qualitative, only because most of the time the kind of hypothetical, theoretical things that people have floating around their heads tend to not be based on anything. So I like to go away and have a bit of a hypothesis gathering exercise, and then I can very specifically target what is this thing specifically. Having said that, that survey that I was talking about, the Onsite survey, I'm happy to roll that out at any point, and then we can start start building up those theories, which I can then take into a qualitative test. So Cecile actually gathers the in-page feedback on the thing that I'm working on now, sends me back a report, and then what I do with that is go, oh, okay, I can see there's a trend of this particular thing that I want to know more about, so I take that into my usability session and ask about it.
So would that have open-ended questions, and if it has?
Never, ever, ever do open-ended questions in a survey.
Yeah,
You do not want to code data.
So how would you do the formative research in a survey if it's not open-ended?
Yeah, so the formative research is more about who are they. So when I say who are you, I'm going to give you a drop-down list of like, are you, so the one that I'm thinking, so I worked for Christie's. They basically have kind of 4 types of people. You're trying to sell something, you're trying to buy something, or you're a buyer for someone else, or you're basically just speculating and you're just having to look around the website. There's kind of the 4 types of people. So I give you a who are you, and you can tick any of those boxes, any or all of them. The what were you trying to do, again, is of this list of things, which one were you trying to do? Were you looking for a piece of artwork? Were you trying to get in contact because you want to sell something? There's kind of a set of things that you can do. And then were you successful is a straight up like Likert 5-point scale thing. The reason why I say never do open-end questions is a ball ache to code those things. I spent 3.5 months coding 1 million lines of code when I was doing my master's degree, and it was awful. I just don't want you to suffer like I suffered. Other stuff?
How do you summarize your findings, like, particularly if you're working with other researchers, like you kind of each deliver on each one, or do you kind of try and come together and talk it through? How does...
I very rarely get to work with other researchers collaboratively. The fact that I am a researcher on a team, well, it's like the only researcher on the team most of the time, is a goddamn miracle. So most of the time, now this is where I do what I call UXing my own work. So now I know who is in the room and what kind of deliverable can I give back to them that they're going to respond to. So designers tend to like things that like, there's a big screenshot of whatever it is that we were just working on, and then I just point to it and go, here's what happened, tell them a story. My rule of thumb here with stakeholders is the higher you go up in the organization, the slide deck gets much shorter, and the less words and the more pictures on the slides. So I did it was basically a complete redesign, so that contextual inquiry thing for the internal tool. We built the internal tool. We ran some analysis, and the efficiency of these guys went up by 61%. It's a great news story, right? Cool. Guys, thanks so much. My things, those things are there. Get in contact. Come ask me questions and stuff. I'll hopefully have some horrible yet funny anecdotes for you. Yeah? Yay! Thanks.
Hello, 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 hello.
This is my first one.
I really enjoyed the talk. Thought the speaker was really talented, a really good communicator. Very insightful, I think.
I do sort of web hosting.
I'm a software graduate and front-end engineer.
Having briefs from clients and things like that is kind of a new area, but I'm thinking about possibly starting to offer some sort of web development services as well. So it's an area that would be useful.
I got a really interesting insight. You can have a bias. I think UX designers are much more into working together in cross-functional teams and finding out like what's actually needed, what's the goal.
Yes, it was good.
Definitely, yeah. Definitely will come to some more.